Welcome back to Old School Sports and happy OOTP 24 release day. Looks like the game was released on Steam less than an hour ago. I already have it downloaded, been playing around with it a very tiny bit, and want to put together the first tutorial of the new version. And I'm also going to let you in on a little secret. But to let you in on that little secret, you've got to do a favor for me. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, would sincerely appreciate it if you do right now. Appreciate it if you like our videos, leave some comments down below, and help others find us in this little world of the internet. So now that you've gone ahead and done that, I will let you know a little secret. I am kind of a deadbeat, and I will explain how. It is Friday, and I fortunately have a situation at work in this post-COVID era where I am still able to work from home on most Fridays. But I have taken today off from work, but I have not let my family know that I have the day off, because I plan on being sequestered up here in my office where I typically work from, playing OOTP 24 all day long and hopefully working on a few videos. So please let me know in the comments down below whether you think that makes me a deadbeat, a horrible person, or just a loyal fan of the game making a smart decision. And if you've been looking closely, you see that we have the New York Yankees, my personal team, loaded up here in OOTP 24. We just started a standard game. We have not tweaked anything to the settings with one exception. We did make scouting accuracy 100% accurate for purposes of what we're going to be doing right now. And what we are going to be doing right now is taking a look at the trading difficulty and going through 5 scenarios in OOTP 24, just to hopefully give you a better idea, and for me, give me a better idea of how the AI has changed, what the trading difficulty looks like, and what trade settings may work for you. Right now, I am on the trade settings from the default of OOTP 24, again with the standard game start. We're going to take a look at 5 different trade scenarios at the default settings, at easy trading difficulty, and at the hardest trading difficulty, just to see how those scenarios change. And it'll definitely give me an idea of where I want the trade settings to be when I start playing some long-term sims. And hopefully it'll give you a little bit idea of the same thing for games that you will potentially be playing going forward. And the first trade that we're going to explore is what we can get for a somewhat close to replacement level type player. We're going to look at IKF. Looks like with the way the Yankees have their roster set up right now, that Aaron Boone intends to go with Oswald Peraza as the starting shortstop. And when you look at IKF, although he doesn't strike out much and he's versatile defensively, that bat is just brutal. He's actually put up a positive WAR the last few seasons, but certainly a bat like that would be difficult to have on a major league team. Fortunately, the contract is just for this season, but would certainly love to potentially get him off of the team. So again, looking at the base settings, we are going to shop him around, and you can see that I do have the new tutorials set up to pop up on me. So far, I haven't found anything incredibly insightful in the little tutorial pop-ups, but I have been playing the game for a long time at this point. So again, this is with the standard trade setting for a standard game, a little bit above average, see what we can potentially get. And I'll kind of spend some time going through this and putting together what I think is the most interesting deal, and then we'll repeat this with a very easy trade setting and the most difficult trade setting to see what the differences are. And just from a quick look at the players available here, my initial thought is that I'm probably going to want to play on a more difficult trade setting than the base one. You can see straight up for Falefa, we can get a lot of players who are pretty good quality that are making big money. We could pick up Iglesias from the Braves as our closer, which would not be the worst move for the Yankees in this post-Chapman era. $16 million a year, certainly expensive for a closer, but an excellent pitcher with a pretty good track record of having been a productive major league player. You look at the pitching stats over the course of his career, and his ERA plus is pretty strong at 139. And you can see, if you're familiar with previous games that I've played, I haven't even set up my own views yet or imported any views yet, so I'll have to do that going forward eventually, but don't need to for purposes of this exercise. But could pick up Iglesias as a closer, could pick up Ryan Presley from the Astros as a closer. Would be pretty surprised in real life if the Astros were to deal a potential closer to the Yankees to have a IKF return to Texas. And then perhaps most interestingly, Yoshida, who the Red Sox just brought on board and who the game views as a pretty good offensive player, almost 30 years old, but could get him straight up as well. So definitely seems like, from my perspective, although in most cases it's taking on some significant money, which not every team is going to do, I think the Yankees would jump at the opportunity to make any of these trades. And you can see that this one kind of is what it is. Even if I try to get the Braves to just retain a tiny bit of the salary of Iglesias, doesn't make the trade work now. But I would certainly view, if the Yankees could trade Kiner Falefa for Raisel Iglesias, I would view that as a huge win for the Yankees. So that seems to me to be a reasonable trade. Not necessarily a reasonable trade, but a trade that you can make of IKF with the base settings. And moving things down to the easiest trade level, you can see we can not just get Iglesias from the Braves, but we can also get, at least in terms of the star ratings, 3 of the top prospects in the Braves system back as well. Catcher Drake Baldwin, who's probably not going to have quite a major league bat, but could be a decent backup catcher. We can get left fielder Tyler Collins. Again, not a great prospect, but has some speed, decent defensively, could potentially be a 5th outfielder for somebody. And closer Landon Harper, who, again, is a long way from the majors, not quite 22 years old. Certainly looks like he's got a major league quality fastball and slider. So not necessarily brilliant prospects, but at the easiest trade settings, can get 3 prospects in addition to Iglesias for IKF from the Yankees. And just so you know, if you take out those 3 players, you can actually only get them to retain 10% of his contract. So not as huge an impact at the easiest trade setting there. Clearly, it seems like the reason the Braves would consider making this trade is to get that money off the books. And now we've moved on to the hardest trade setting, and you can see Iglesias is no longer being offered. Ryan Presley is no longer being offered. Definitely lower quality players with big dollars on their contracts. Eduardo Rodriguez, who signed that big deal with Detroit, kind of a average-ish major league starter. He's got the opportunity to opt out. Don't know whether he will do that or not, but certainly a interesting candidate potentially for the back end of pitching rotation. But certainly you can see here at the highest settings, you've got guys like Scott Kingery, who has a pretty difficult contract at this point, given his lack of production at the major league level. Rhys Hoskins, who I believe just suffered a pretty serious injury. I guess that's not quite in the game yet, but player in the last year of his contract, could actually be a interesting designated hitter type for the Yankees, although they probably have plenty of players right now who fit the bill on that front. So we're going to kind of see the best deal that we can put together on the hardest trade settings for IKF. Clearly, we're not going to get nearly as much as we did in the base settings, and obviously significantly less than we did at the easiest trade setting. And on the hardest trade settings, to me, the best that we can get for IKF is Eduardo Rodriguez from Detroit, and we're getting them to retain 20% of his contract. With the injuries that the Yankees are dealing with this spring training, and particularly with some of the pitching issues that they're dealing with the starting rotation, bringing on a lefty starter into Yankee Stadium doesn't seem like the worst potential idea. I think that Rodriguez is definitely overpaid. He's a fourth or fifth starter at this point who's being paid probably more like a third or maybe even a second starter. He does have that player opt-out, but fortunately if he opts in with the deal that we've put together, we would have Detroit retaining a portion of that contract going forward. Don't know that I would actually do this deal if I was managing the Yankees for the long term, but I think I would certainly think about it. But you can see the difference on the hardest trade setting. Definitely some tougher decisions. Decent players like Rodriguez available, but you're generally going to be offered players whose contracts are less than ideal. So moving on to our second scenario, we've changed the settings back to the base settings as far as trade difficulty. And in real life, I don't know that I'd try this because Jose Trevino looks like a defensive monster in OOTP 24. If this was OOTP 22, he would be a absolute monster with that 80 catcher rating and 65 arm. We'll have to see how important catcher defense is, but certainly would not be thinking about replacing him in most cases. But what we are going to look at right now is how to bring on a veteran contract to the Yankees under these various scenarios. And we are going to go to the Kansas City Royals and see exactly what it would take to bring on Salvador Perez. Captain personality, obviously has that excellent home run power, and still a respectable defensive catcher. What would it take to bring him on board at the base trade settings for the Yankees? And at the base trade difficulty settings, we could pick up Salvador Perez for Gleyber Torres, the, I guess, veteran at this point now, second baseman. Hasn't developed into the great hitter that I think some of us Yankees fans thought he would in the early stages of his career, but still had a pretty nice bounce-back season last year in terms of the power, which was good to see. We'd have to give up Torres as well as Will Warren, who's a decent 23-year-old pitching prospect, probably more a back end of the rotation kind of guy in the major leagues, or more likely a middle reliever, it looks like, in terms of the way the game has him evaluated. But we also don't have tons of budget space available, which made it a little more difficult to take on Perez contract. Meant we had to put some salary back in return, but will be interesting to see. And we're going to continue to kind of build the deal around Torres and Warren just to kind of keep as many variables consistent as we possibly can when we're changing these other variables. We'll take a look and see how much Perez would cost under the easiest trade setting possible next. And honestly, there's actually not a huge difference at the easiest trade setting, but again, I think part of that is that because we need to take on Perez's big contract of making $20 million a year, and we've only got about $11 million to go. Torres making close to $10 million is an obvious guy for us to keep in the contract. So we still have to include Torres and Warren, but at the easiest trade setting, we do get the Royals to retain 15% of Perez's contract for the next 3 years before he's once again a free agent. And on the hardest trade setting for Salvador Perez, still have to give them Torres, still have to give them Will Warren. They won't retain any of his contract. And we also have to add in the left fielder Austin Wells, soon to be 24-year-old, spent last year in Double-A where he hit 261 with 12 homers. Looks like he could be a respectable fourth outfielder down the line. So it'd certainly have to give up a little bit more to get the deal done on the hardest trade setting. Clearly, the amount of money that Perez was being paid made the volatility, I think, between the easiest trade setting and the hardest trade setting certainly less in this one than we saw in the deal for IKF. But that should give you a broad overview of what it kind of takes on the different trade settings to bring on a good veteran player who's making some good money. And this third scenario is going to be an interesting one. Let's say that the Yankees decide coming out of spring training that the number 42 prospect in baseball, Oswald Peraza, is their long-term answer at shortstop. And they decide that they're going to move on from Anthony Volpe, who is their number 15 prospect in baseball, a local kid to New York, having grown up in suburban New Jersey. Great personality. Certainly looks like second base is probably going to be his position at the major league level. But let's say that the Yankees decide that they don't need him and they're going to move on. What can we get at the three different trade settings for the number 15 prospect in all of baseball? And at the base level trade settings, a lot of interesting options for Volpe. Merrill Kelly has obviously become very famous over the last several days with his performance in the World Baseball Classic for the United States. Pretty good prospect, Alec Thomas from the Diamondbacks. Certainly looks like a pretty decent defensive center fielder with a good personality and potentially a decent major league bat, almost 23 years old. And there's some other interesting offers out there. Ceddanne Rafaela from the Red Sox, 22-year-old prospect. I don't know that I would personally trade him straight up for Volpe, given the ratings that we see on both of these players. The Cubs offering Nico Horner. Cincinnati Reds offering catcher Tyler Stevenson. At this point, a pretty proven major league catcher with a pretty solid bat, good personality, above average defensively, so that's an interesting offer. There's a lot of other things out there. Drew Romo from the Rockies, number 50 prospect in baseball, excellent defensive catcher. They would offer him straight up. That would be a interesting opportunity, I think, for the Yankees to think about. And the Detroit Tigers, offering several of their top potential prospects, Ty Madden, Matt Manning, Spencer Torkelson, Riley Green on the list. I think we're going to look at trying to build something among these Tigers prospects just because there's some pretty familiar names to baseball fans in these players. And will be interesting to kind of see what we can get for Volpe here at the base case scenario, and then how much more on the easiest setting and how much less on the hardest setting. And at the base case setting, I think this is a hint that I may want the ultimate settings to be a little harder when I play a long-term playthrough. But for Volpe, admittedly an excellent prospect with the way OOTP views him. Great personality. Looks like he's going to have a good bat. Pretty versatile defensively. Can certainly play a lot of infield positions, although second is kind of his natural spot based on these ratings. But Detroit would give up center fielder Riley Green, who's a 22-year-old, made his major league debut last year. Decent bat, good defensive center fielder. First baseman Spencer Torkelson, nice home run bat potentially. Starting pitcher Matt Manning, been in the majors for a couple years at this point. certainly looks like he could be a back end of the rotation type of starter. And then they'd also include Eduardo Rodriguez, and probably most importantly, they'd retain 55% of his contract. So certainly, I don't want the Yankees to trade away Volpe as a Yankees fan, but if they were able to get a haul like this for him, it would certainly be something that I think they should seriously think about. I'm kind of interested to see when we go to the easiest setting what kind of insane haul we're going to get to be able to get for Volpe then, and that's what we're going to find out next. And we kind of switch things up here on the easiest trade settings. We know that we can get a haul from the Tigers, and I'll show you what that haul could be. But when I went through the list of players that were offered straight up for Volpe on the easiest trade settings, Brian Reynolds from Pittsburgh was on the list, and this is obviously a player that many wealthier teams like the Yankees have allegedly been circling around the Tigers like vultures waiting for them to move on from him at some point as he starts making more and more money. So certainly would be a nice bat for the Yankees to add. And the Pirates on the easiest trade setting would actually eat 25% of his salary this year and then add in shortstop Nick Gonzalez, who quite honestly, at least in terms of his potential ratings, is not that far off Volpe. Also has a good personality, pretty similar defensively, as well as second baseman Andres Alvarez, another very similar player defensively, not quite as good a bat. But once again, at the easiest trade setting, I think the Yankees would probably take this deal in a second, even though they wouldn't want to get rid of Mr. Volpe. And just for the record, on the easiest trade setting, the Yankees are able to get the same package from Detroit, and they're able to get the Tigers to retain 70% of Rodriguez's potential contract for the next 4 seasons if he does not exercise that player option to get out. So obviously an even better deal for the Yankees. And now we'll move on and see in the hardest trade settings what the Yankees can get for one of the top prospects in baseball. And on the hardest trade setting, the package that the Yankees could get for Volpe from the Tigers actually doesn't change all that much. Still can get Green, Torkelson, and Manning. The only change is that the Tigers will only retain 40% of Rodriguez's contract. So really between the easiest trade setting and the hardest trade setting, at least when dealing away a premium prospect, there wasn't a ton of volatility in the package that we could get from the Tigers. It's basically just at the hardest trade setting, they retained 40% of Rodriguez. The recommended trade setting, they retained 55%. And the easiest trade setting, they would retain 70% of his contract. And that was only the difference between the 3 Tigers packages. Obviously, we did see on the easiest setting that opened up the opportunity for the Yankees to bring on Brian Reynolds, which, as well as a couple of other prospects, which would certainly be an interesting scenario if the Yankees were faced with that in real life. And in our fourth and penultimate trade scenario, we are going to go and find out what it's going to take for the Yankees to bring on a star pitcher in the prime of his career. Corbin Burnes is not pleased with the Milwaukee Brewers after what they put him through with arbitration this spring. And although I guess it was technically probably this winter when he went through that with them, since it's only been spring for a few days now. But what would it take to bring Corbin Burnes and his brilliant arm, awesome 5-pitch arsenal coming off of another really good major league season where the Brewers management, according to Burnes, blamed him for missing the playoffs when they got to the arbitration hearing. Not the exact words that he used, but essentially he was not pleased with how that went down. Maybe the relationship is shattered, and we need to figure out what the Yankees would need to give up to bring on Corbin Burnes at the recommended trade setting in OOTP 24. And on the base trade setting, we did come up with a deal, and we didn't even have to give up any of the Yankees' top prospects to bring Corbin Burnes on board. And we actually were able to get them to retain 15% of his contract. Still would be a very painful trade for the Yankees to make, because they would be crushing their major league roster to get it done. Have to include Gleyber Torres, who we've talked about, relief pitcher Zach Green, nice cost-effective youngster, Domingo Germán, veteran starting pitcher. Surprised he's normal as far as his injury proneness in this version of the game, but have to include him also. Have to include reliever Ron Marinaccio, another younger player, cost-controlled, decent major league reliever. And then most importantly, we do have to include Jose Trevino. That would, given his incredible catcher rating in OOTP, the captain personality, that would make this trade very difficult for me. There was also a package that we could put together with a lot of the Yankees' top prospects that would bring Burnes on board. But I think that we'll look at the basis of this Torres, Green, Germán, Trevino, and Marinaccio and see how using those guys as the core of the trade rather than youngsters changes when we move down to the easiest trade setting and up to the hardest trade setting. And Jose Trevino is clearly the key to getting this deal for Corbin Burnes done with the Brewers. But at the easiest trade setting, you can see we need to include Trevino, Torres, and Marinaccio. But we do not need to include the reliever Green or Domingo Germán. So the Yankees save a couple of players, and they're also able to get the Brewers to keep another 5% of Burnes' salary at 20% for next year at the easiest trade setting available in OOTP 24. And on the hardest trade setting, we have to give up that same 5-player package that we gave up on the base case trade difficulty setting, and we're unable to get the Brewers to keep any of Corbin Burnes' contracts. So honestly, not a huge difference. Both of the trades very painful. Again, as I said before, with Trevino having such exceptional catcher ability, I think that was the big attractant of the Brewers that helped get these deals done. Without him, you can see if we remove Trevino from the deal, looking at make this work now, he's still the only guy in our organization who makes it work. So they really loved him, and he was really the cornerstone of what we needed to send to Milwaukee to get a potential deal for the ace starter done. I think that price is really high in all three scenarios, but by the same or by a different token, I guess you're getting a excellent pitcher who's not injury prone, who's right in the prime of his career to really pair up with Garrett Cole and hopefully Nestor Cortez, and then hopefully eventually Carlos Rodon at the top of that Yankees rotation. And we are back to the base case trade settings for our final scenario. Final scenario is going to be what it takes to dump a bad contract. Aaron Hicks still has 3 full seasons plus a team option, which will presumably be declined on his contract. According to OOTP 24, and even according to his performance on the field in recent years, not all that good of a hitter, nothing exceptional defensively. Certainly think the Yankees would love to move on from this contract if they could. And we're going to find out how they would have options to do that. Do they have to give up a ton more players, or is it just a matter of taking back a bad contract or a lower quality player? Find out exactly what escaping from Aaron Hicks would look like under the 3 different scenarios, starting with the base case. And on the default trade setting, perhaps not a surprise, no team offers a single player in a trade for Aaron Hicks' contract. So we're going to try to shop him again, with the Yankees retaining 50% of that contract. And we've got a few offers out there to work from. Once again, Eduardo Rodriguez from the Tigers. We've spent so much time playing around with the Tigers that maybe we'll go in a different direction to just see what we can get from a different team. Although I think that if the Yankees could bring on a pitcher like Rodriguez, might as well just look at this. Not the deal that I'm going to do, but how much less can the Yankees potentially retain of Aaron Hicks to get it done? Yeah, they would have to retain 40% of Hicks' contract for the next few years and take on all of Rodriguez's contract. I don't know financially whether that's something the Yankees would do or not, but interesting options to think about. And just to change things up, like I said, we've used Detroit for a lot of these trades on the other side. We'll go to the Phillies, and we could get the final year of Rhys Hoskins, who would not be a bad bat to have, injury notwithstanding, which isn't in the game at this point. Have to retain 45% of Hicks's contract for those next 3 seasons before he gets to the team option. So it would be a lot. The Yankees would definitely feel good to have less money on the books associated with Hicks in 2024 and 2025. But you're not really getting much of anything in return. But perhaps that's to be expected when you're looking to dump a contract. And moving on to the easiest trade setting and retaining the 45% that we were needing to retain to bring Hoskins on board. Not really a ton of new options. The one that pops out is James McCann from the Orioles. Respectable catcher, certainly older at this point and making some pretty good money, but that's kind of really the only new option that I noted on the list. So we'll go back to Hoskins and see how much less we can potentially get them to accept in terms of what we'll be retaining. And it looks like it's definitely a different dynamic here. Yeah, at the easiest trade setting, only need to retain 5% of Aaron Hicks' contract, and the Yankees can get Rhys Hoskins on board for this year, and then he's a free agent next season. I think that the Yankees would certainly jump at this type of opportunity in the in real life if they could. Hoskins making $12 million this year, bringing him on. But Hicks is scheduled to make 10.5. As you can see there, the available money drops by $2 million this year. So spending $2 million more this year, but they're getting out of the $9.5 million. Only spending about $500,000 a year on Hicks going forward for the last 2 years of the contract. So definitely a lot more palatable to the Yankees to get out of that deal on the easiest trade setting. And last but not least, and not surprisingly on the hardest trade setting possible, the Yankees have to retain 70% of Hicks' contract for the next 3 years to get Hoskins in exchange and get the deal done. So went from needing to keep almost nothing of his contract for Hoskins at the easiest level to a pretty good chunk at the default level to the majority of his contract, more than 2/3 of it at the hardest level. So definitely some differences there to think about. And speaking of thinking about things, hopefully this video gave you something to think about as you consider what trade settings to use in OOTP 24. I know that I just kind of blasted through all this. I don't think I've totally absorbed what I was talking about as I did this. I don't know that I have a really great opinion right now on exactly what what I'm going to use as my trade settings going forward. Need to spend a little more time with the game. And honestly, I probably just need to watch this video myself and think a little bit more about what the trade-offs were between the base setting and the more difficult setting. I think certainly I won't be moving the slider down materially towards the easiest settings with what I come up with, but need to give some thought to what I think is the most reasonable and the most fair that makes the game a good challenge while also actually enabling some trades to actually occur. So those are the things that I will be thinking about as I think about the trade difficulty that I want to use going forward in OOTP 24. If you've got some experience with the different trade settings already, or if you have any thoughts on what was just too easy, what was just too hard, what makes sense, would love to hear them down below. And until our next episode, thanks so much for watching. Hope you have a great day, and those of you who have the new game, I hope you're enjoying it.